I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
The message reached Queen Camilla after the palace corridors had fallen silent, and its meaning was devastatingly clear. Prince William had severed her final direct connection to the crown estate, ending her access to private briefings, property schedules, and the liaison who had quietly carried her requests into its inner offices. There was no warning, no negotiation, only a formal order bearing the authority of the future king, and a deadline that expired before midnight. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla returned to Clarence's house from a private dinner, expecting only the usual red boxes. Her private secretary placed a tablet and stepped away as she opened the sealed notice. The Crown Estate, the independently managed property portfolio whose profits help fund the monarchy, had been instructed to terminate her household's connection at midnight. William's order removed her dedicated liaison, confidential briefings, advanced property schedules, and authority to route private requests through the Queen's household. That office supports the monarch's wife and organizes her work. But this channel offered something more sensitive: early knowledge and influence before decisions reached Charles. Camilla read the order once, then again. Confusion tightened into humiliation as she realized the decision was immediate and already moving through offices. The connection had never given her ownership of Crown Estate land, yet it allowed her staff to anticipate changes and shape discussions before formal proposals arrived. She turned to her secretary and asked whether Charles had approved this. The answer did not come. His silence wounded her more deeply than any clause on the screen. William sat at Windsor with the signed order before him, but he felt no triumph. The prince knew many would see an attack on his stepmother, while Camilla would see proof that years of service had earned her neither trust nor security. Yet he believed the unchecked channel threatened the authority he was preparing to inherit. A recorded administrative account from the internal review showed that requests had passed through her household without reaching him. Some concerned property schedules. Others reached further. He could no longer ignore them. Camilla scrolled to the final line and stopped. King Charles III had been copied into the notice. The sovereign had known the order was coming, even if he had not signed it, and that discovery changed her shock into fury. She closed the tablet, rose, and demanded a private meeting with William that same night. The access had vanished with one signature. But the deeper wound was personal, and she was ready to confront the man who had delivered it. This was not merely a dispute over briefings or property schedules. It was a collision between three people, bound by family, rank, grief, and years of carefully managed resentment. Camilla saw the connection as proof that she belonged at the center of royal power. William saw it as an unchecked passage into his future responsibilities. And Charles, caught between his wife and his heir, understood that protecting one could permanently wound the other. Camilla had relied on the Crown Estate liaison for more than information. Every private briefing told her that she had moved beyond simple acceptance and become essential to royal decisions. As queen consort, the wife of the reigning monarch without the king's governing authority, she knew her influence depended heavily on trust. Losing that connection felt like losing the clearest proof that the palace finally considered her indispensable. Camilla entered a private study with her sister Annabelle and removed her reading glasses. She set them down sharply, then admitted that William's silence hurt more than the lost access. "I am tolerated, not trusted," she said. Annabelle tried to calm her, but the queen insisted that the order had exposed her true position. Her sister heard anger in those words. Beneath it, however, Annabelle recognized something darker: fear. William carried a different burden. As Prince of Wales, the title traditionally held by the heir preparing to become king, he had become increasingly protective of how property, money, and influence would pass into the next reign. Catherine found him standing beside an unopened dinner tray at Windsor, staring at nothing. He confessed that cutting Camilla's connection felt brutal, yet allowing it to remain meant ignoring requests submitted through her household without his knowledge. The princess understood his choice, but she also saw what it had cost him. Charles sat alone with the same notice and slowly folded the printed copy. The king knew his hesitation had forced his son to act. He had delayed the review because he feared humiliating his wife, but that delay had deepened William's suspicion and left Camilla dangerously exposed. The documented household account carried another painful detail. Months earlier, Camilla had received a written warning that her special access would be reviewed. She treated it as routine and never believed William would enforce it. Catherine then discovered why he had refused to retreat. One disputed request involved a residence tied closely to his childhood memories of Diana. His mother had once found peace there, and Diana's connection transformed an administrative concern into a deeply personal wound. William finally told Catherine that everything began with one short conversation at a Windsor reception, an exchange Camilla believed he had forgotten. To understand why the prince acted, they would have to return to the moment when a polite request crossed an invisible family line. The true beginning of the crisis came 6 weeks earlier, beneath the polished calm of a Windsor reception. There, during a conversation that lasted less than 4 minutes, Camilla made a request concerning a secluded Crown Estate residence linked to William's childhood. Her words were measured. Her manner was confident. But when the prince discovered that the request had already entered official channels before she mentioned it to him, courtesy hardened into suspicion, and suspicion became resolve. William had already spent months reviewing informal privileges scattered across different royal households. Those households, the staff offices that organize each senior royal's duties, schedules, and official requests, had collected special arrangements through years of custom. Some were written down, others survived because no one had challenged them. The future king feared these quiet privileges were allowing personal influence to operate without clear authority, leaving him responsible for decisions he had never seen. Camilla's connection had survived earlier changes because Charles considered it practical. The king believed his wife needed fast access to property information when arranging official and private commitments. Yet William saw a dangerous line disappearing. Convenience had begun to resemble control, and one request would bring that fear painfully close to home. Camilla approached him during the reception and calmly announced her intention to reserve Aldercombe Lodge for several private gatherings. The secluded residence had sheltered William during childhood summers near Diana, giving the place an emotional meaning no schedule could explain. She spoke as though the booking required only a final confirmation. He paused, placed his untouched glass on a side table, and asked whether her household had already submitted the request. Camilla answered that her liaison was handling the details. The words changed everything. William realized the process had begun before she had spoken to him. He kept his voice low, but Catherine noticed his hand tighten against the back of a chair. To the prince, a place connected to his mother was being treated like an available administrative asset. Diana's memory was not merely attached to Aldercombe. It lived inside his understanding of what the residence represented. Camilla saw something different. She believed his cold response was another refusal to accept her place beside Charles. Later that evening, she told the monarch that his son was turning old grief into a weapon against her present role. He tried to calm her, but she left convinced that William's objection was personal. The recorded conversation summary exposed a harder truth. Camilla's request included renovation priorities, guest security arrangements, and proposed staffing changes, far beyond a simple question about availability. William ordered a confidential audit, meaning a private examination of every request routed through her connection. Aldercombe was not the first. It was only the latest. Camilla soon learned that he had examined the complete record. Their approaching meeting would concern far more than one residence. What began beside a Windsor side table would now erupt behind a closed door, where neither rank nor family affection could soften the confrontation. Camilla entered the private sitting room, expecting an explanation. William entered carrying the audit that had ended her access. No aides remained between them, and no ceremonial language could disguise what each believed had been taken away. She saw a deliberate public diminishment planned by a stepson who had never fully trusted her. He saw a pattern of influence operating beyond scrutiny. Then the door closed, and years of restrained resentment finally found a voice. Silence pressed against the small Windsor room shortly before midnight. At William's request, both private secretaries had left, removing the staff members who normally manage royal correspondence and protect their principals from direct conflict. Neither Camilla nor the prince could now hide behind prepared language, filtered explanations, or competing versions of what had happened. William placed a slim folder on the table. The confidential audit, a private examination of dates, requests, and access records, did not accuse the Queen of taking money or claiming ownership. It exposed something harder to defend, an unexamined route into Crown Estate discussions that allowed her household to influence decisions before normal approval had begun. He opened the folder, but Camilla refused to sit. "You had no right to humiliate me without speaking to me first," she said. William answered that the Windsor reception had given her that opportunity. She had mentioned Aldercombe Lodge, yet she had never disclosed the renovation requests, security plans, or staffing instructions already traveling through her liaison. His voice remained controlled. That restraint only sharpened her fury. Camilla accused him of punishing her for memories she could never change. Her voice broke as she admitted what the order had made her feel, that she would always remain an outsider inside the family she had married into. William did not deny that Diana's memory had shaped his concern. The late princess was tied to Aldercombe, and he could not pretend that connection meant nothing. But this was about boundaries, he insisted, not revenge. He could not inherit a system where private relationships carried more power than clear authority. Camilla finally opened the folder. 3 requests stopped her cold. She denied authorizing them and turned each page more quickly, her anger giving way to alarm. Someone had not merely used her access. Someone had expanded it beyond her instructions. William then disclosed how the audit had traced every disputed request. Each one had passed through the same liaison, and every message carried a household authentication code controlled by Camilla's office. The Queen demanded that the official be brought before them immediately. William's answer landed without mercy. The liaison had already been suspended and questioned under a recorded administrative inquiry. The confrontation had exposed Camilla's pain, but that testimony was about to expose the machinery behind her influence and make the prince's decision impossible to reverse. Behind every royal order lies a quieter world of permissions, passwords, briefing lists, and trusted intermediaries. Camilla's power had not rested on a single grand command. It had traveled through a narrow administrative network that allowed her household to ask questions before others knew decisions were being considered. William's audit uncovered how easily access could become influence. Yet the most painful discovery was not that the system had been abused. It was that Charles had repeatedly postponed fixing it. Camilla's dedicated liaison connected her household to selected Crown Estate briefings, giving her staff advance notice of maintenance schedules, hospitality options, and sensitive property discussions. Formal control remained with the organization's leadership, but royal communication depended on trust, protocol, and limited access. That distinction mattered. The Queen could not command the estate, yet early information allowed her office to shape requests before everyone else entered the conversation. Jonathan Vale sat across from William, in a plain administrative office, nervously turning his signet ring. The suspended liaison insisted during a recorded inquiry that he believed every authenticated request carried Camilla's approval. He had seen the household code, recognized the language used by her staff, and acted without demanding personal confirmation. Jonathan admitted that speed had slowly replaced caution. The prince listened without interruption, because the answer confirmed his deepest concern. Nobody had needed to break the rules when the rules were dangerously unclear. Camilla confronted Eleanor March before the inquiry had even ended. As deputy private secretary, a senior aide responsible for correspondence, planning, and official requests, Eleanor had been trusted to protect her authority. Instead, she admitted advancing minor requests without direct approval because she wanted to avoid burdening the queen. Camilla felt betrayed by the very efficiency she had once praised. She asked how many times her name had been used. Her aide could not answer immediately. Charles received a separate file containing 2 earlier recommendations to formalize the connection. He closed it slowly and admitted to Anne that both warnings had reached him. The king had delayed acting because he feared another confrontation between his wife and his son. Anne answered with brutal calm. Avoiding conflict had not prevented the crisis. It had allowed the arrangement to become dangerously vague. The Princess Royal, the monarch's senior working sister, told him that silence had simply transferred the burden to William. The documented email chain delivered the final blow. Eleanor had repeatedly written, "Her Majesty's standing preference," creating the impression that Camilla had granted continuing approval even when no direct instruction existed. William's order was therefore not aimed at one person. It destroyed the entire informal route and required every future request to be recorded, checked, and reviewed. Camilla's first consequence arrived before dawn. Aldercombe Lodge cancelled her planned gathering before guests could be privately warned. By morning, the vanished access was no longer an abstract loss. It was canceling plans, stripping authority from her staff, and exposing her diminished position one painful call at a time. At 8 the next morning, Camilla's office attempted to confirm the Aldercombe gathering. The reply arrived within minutes. The household no longer possessed the authority to make the request. A second message cancelled a scheduled property briefing. Then a third removed 2 members of her staff from a confidential distribution list. Each notice was courteous. Together, they delivered a brutal reality. William's order had not been symbolic. Her old influence was already disappearing. Camilla's staff watched months of planning collapse before breakfast. Briefing calendars vanished from their system. Direct scheduling contacts stopped responding, and advance property notices were redirected to the king's office. Those privileges had allowed the Queen's team to prepare engagements before formal decisions became public. Without them, her household would react to events rather than help shape them. Eleanor began calling guests invited to Aldercombe Lodge. She offered only one careful explanation: a change in household arrangements. The words sounded harmless, but the abrupt cancellation immediately stirred private speculation. Eleanor knew several guests would contact one another within minutes, and she understood that silence would make the mystery grow faster. Camilla entered her morning room and found 3 cancellation notices beside her tea. She dismissed the staff, lifted the Aldercombe guest list, and tore it in half. Then anger gave way to something quieter. She placed both pieces together and carefully smoothed the paper. William had not merely challenged her authority. He had exposed how much of her confidence depended on access that had never permanently belonged to her. William received confirmation at Windsor that every restriction had taken effect. Catherine noticed relief pass across his face, followed almost instantly by guilt. When the prince learned that Camilla had begun making some cancellation calls herself, he looked away. He had wanted a clean boundary, not a morning of personal humiliation. The princess reminded him that necessary decisions could still cause genuine pain. Jonathan's formal account, a recorded statement submitted during the internal inquiry, complicated the story further. He cleared Camilla of personally approving 2 disputed requests, but confirmed that she had allowed broad verbal instructions to guide her office without regular review. Jonathan had interpreted flexibility as continuing permission. That failure did not make the Queen dishonest, but it made the system impossible to defend. Anne confronted Charles with the choice he had tried to avoid. She warned that restoring the connection would undermine William and preserve the same ambiguity that created the crisis. The king knew his wife needed comfort, yet the Princess Royal insisted that comfort could not mean reversing reform. Charles cancelled his morning engagement and asked Camilla to meet privately. She refused, convinced that his earlier silence meant he had already chosen his son. Catherine then stepped forward with a different request, a private conversation with the Queen, away from files, officials, and competing households. The machinery of power had delivered its verdict, but the crisis would turn only when 2 women spoke without titles, standing between them. Catherine did not arrive carrying William's audit or an argument prepared by palace advisors. She came alone. Camilla expected a defense of the prince, perhaps even a carefully worded warning. Instead, the princess sat opposite her and admitted that the decision had reopened wounds inside her own household as well. For the first time since the order arrived, Camilla was not facing an institution. She was facing someone who understood what royal survival could demand and what it could cost. Camilla received her at Clarence House without aides or private secretaries. Catherine asked that the door remain slightly open, making the conversation feel less like another formal confrontation while keeping every word beyond the reach of competing households. The Queen agreed, though her guarded expression made clear that trust had not yet entered the room. Catherine explained that William had spent weeks searching for a narrower solution. He considered limiting the number of briefings, replacing the liaison, and requiring written approval for larger requests. Each alternative preserved part of the same informal connection, leaving space for future confusion and manipulation. The princess admitted that her husband had feared appearing cruel. He acted only when delay became more dangerous than anger. Camilla asked the question she had been carrying since midnight. Did William truly believe she had exploited the system? Catherine answered carefully. The prince did not believe she had designed a secret network. He believed she had trusted a network that eventually began exploiting her name. Camilla's composure weakened. She admitted that losing the access felt like losing proof that she belonged beside the crown. The Queen feared history would remember her as a woman who stood beside the monarch but remained unwanted by the family, carrying the institution forward. That fear had transformed a practical privilege into emotional protection. Without it, she felt exposed. Catherine refused to offer false comfort. Acceptance, she said, could not be secured through privileges that other people might quietly use. William's boundary was not a verdict on Camilla's entire life. It was a decision about authority, responsibility, and the reign he would one day inherit. Her honesty finally allowed the older woman to separate his order from the lifelong judgment she believed it represented. Catherine then disclosed William's proposed compromise during their private conversation. Camilla could receive necessary briefings through the king's recorded household channel, meaning each request would carry clear approval and remain open to later review. She would keep essential information, but her separate route would never return. Camilla did not demand it back. She agreed to remove Eleanor from access-related duties and accepted an independent review, a neutral examination, of every request submitted under her authority. Eleanor would remain employed temporarily, but she would no longer speak with the Queen's institutional voice. Camilla asked Catherine to tell William that she understood the order, even if she could not yet forgive how he delivered it. Their private breakthrough lasted only hours. Inside Clarence House, anger had softened into understanding. Outside, the first headline was already turning a family boundary into a battle for the crown. By lunchtime, A private order known to fewer than a dozen people dominated the national conversation. Broadcasters called it William's strongest assertion of future authority. Commentators described Camilla as isolated. Yet the public did not see the hours of private doubt, the unauthorized requests, or Catherine's intervention. They saw one stark image: the Queen arriving beside Charles, while newspaper stands announced that the Prince of Wales had closed her final private door into the Crown estate. Buckingham Palace issued a short statement confirming that royal household access procedures had been standardized and consolidated. The phrase meant separate informal channels were being replaced by one documented system with clear approval. Officials did not name Camilla or explain the disputed requests, but the silence created space for speculation. Crown estate leaders released no personal details. They confirmed only that future royal communications would pass through recorded channels, supporting William's reform without entering the family conflict. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace as the story spread. At a newspaper stand near the palace gates, one front page carried the words, "William closes Camilla's secret door." A woman lifted the paper toward television cameras, while people around her argued over whether the prince had protected the monarchy or humiliated the king's wife. That single moment captured the public mood: shock, division, and fascination. An evening royal editor gave the story its most powerful frame. During a live broadcast, he called it, "The night the future reign drew its first immovable boundary." The phrase moved quickly across radio discussions and online commentary. Soon, William's administrative decision was being presented as a declaration of independence from Charles. Camilla watched the coverage without speaking. She flinched when the broadcaster suggested she had fought desperately to preserve the privilege. Charles reached for the remote, but she asked him to leave the report playing. The Queen wanted to hear everything, even when every sentence reduced her private fear to public ambition. The king remained beside her, finally understanding how his earlier silence had helped create this humiliation. William faced a different pain at Windsor. He was troubled that institutional reform had become a personal attack on Camilla. Catherine reminded him that public misunderstanding did not make the boundary wrong. The princess also warned that silence could allow the cruelest version of the story to survive. The palace then released the review's central finding through a documented summary. Camilla had not personally authorized every disputed request, but weak supervision had allowed her name to be used too broadly. She responded by approving a second statement, accepting responsibility, and supporting the new access rules. Her decision shattered the narrative of an ongoing royal war. Camilla made one final request that evening. She asked to see William again, not to reclaim what she had lost, but to settle what remained between them. The country had issued its headlines, but the final verdict would come away from cameras. In the few words they still owed each other. Their second meeting contained none of the fury of the first. Camilla no longer demanded that the order be withdrawn, and William no longer arrived carrying evidence. Between them rested a single page describing the new rules, clear, recorded, and equal for every royal household. What had begun as a humiliating severance had become something larger, a test of whether personal pain could be acknowledged without allowing private privilege to govern public duty. This time, neither of them looked away. William met Camilla at Clarence House after her public statement. By entering her home, the prince made clear that he had not come to celebrate a victory. He had come to repair the human wound. The final protocol, a permanent set of written rules, abolished separate informal crown estate connections across every royal household. Necessary briefings would now pass through defined offices, written approval, and records that could later be reviewed. Camilla picked up the pen. She signed the acknowledgement, turned the page toward William, and set the pen down. Then she gave him the truth without anger. His decision had been correct, she said. But the silence before it had been cruel. He had allowed her to discover the loss through an order, when one honest conversation might have spared her deepest humiliation. William accepted the criticism without defending himself. His determination to protect the future crown had made him underestimate the pain Camilla would face in the present. The future king admitted that authority without compassion could become another kind of failure. He would not reverse the order, but he would not pretend his handling of it had been flawless. Camilla acknowledged her failure as well. Her household had operated with freedoms she had not supervised closely enough. The queen would not reclaim the lost connection, and the prince would not pretend their trust had been fully restored. Yet both accepted the same boundary. That mattered, because peace built on clarity could survive where peace built on silence had failed. Charles entered only after their private conversation ended. The king supported the permanent reform and accepted responsibility for postponing an uncomfortable decision until his son had been forced to act. The monarch's admission did not erase the damage, but it ended the uncertainty over where he stood. Eleanor left her access-related position, and her authority to speak for Camilla ended permanently. Jonathan's suspension concluded, but the former liaison was not restored to the royal channel. Jonathan accepted reassignment, while Eleanor submitted a documented account of every request she had advanced. Aldercombe remained cancelled. The informal network was dismantled for good. Camilla lost the privilege she once viewed as proof of belonging, but gained something more honest, a defined place that no longer depended on hidden access. William emerged as an heir, prepared to draw boundaries inside his own family. Her acceptance prevented reform from becoming a lasting royal war. The final connection was gone. The boundary was permanent. The crown moved forward, not without pain, but without ambiguity. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.